Hi, so my name is Stephanie Gonzalez, and today I'm going to be talking about my unit lesson plans. And my case study is a girl, Anna. She is a first grader, and she's actually scoring at level 4 in WIDA. From her last scores, she has actually improved a lot. She's one of the top readers in her classroom. So I'm going to be focusing a lot on achieving grade level WIDA levels 4 and 5, as well as how I would teach it for all my students who are in a dual immersion classroom, and most of them are level 1, level 2 proficiency in all areas of WIDA. So my math lessons are focusing on grade standard 1 NBT, B3, and the objective of our lessons or this unit is to compare two-digit numbers based on meaning of the tens and ones digits and recording the results of comparison with the symbols greater than, equal, and less than. The first two lessons, I will be focusing on comparing numbers with symbols, and my main domains are listening and writing, but with listening, I also coordinate a little bit of reading. Sometimes it's hard to take them apart, and one kind of goes with the other one, and I really thought that listening and reading went well for these lessons. Lesson number 3 compares numbers with a number line. My the domain for that one is reading, and lesson number 4 is make sense and persevere, and that domain will be speaking. So the first domain that I will be focusing on is listening, and I also included a little bit of reading. And this is how I would focus first on the vocabulary. I like to teach the vocabulary in depth for my students. It just gives them a better understanding of what we're going to be doing. So I would use the explicit teaching model of vocabulary. I do, we do, you do, we all do. For example, I would explicitly teach the words more, greater than, less than, fewer, equal, as well as other words that might have different meaning, like circle the number. When you hear the word circle, you don't understand what what it means. You might think of the object of a circle, but you're asking them to circle a number. So I would explain that to them, as well as how to use the vocabulary in their writing. And Gibbons on page 146 and 147 says, on reading, before reading an activity, aim to do the following: develop knowledge in relation to the overall meaning of the text, prepare students for potential language, cultural, and conceptual difficulties, and remind of known vocabulary, support to make predictions. So I would really focus on this for them to listen to the vocabulary before we even begin to continue to read the rest of the lessons. And I would remind them too of vocabulary that we've used in the past. Since this is topic 9 in our curriculum, a lot of these words are familiar with to the students. They kind of have they have a good understanding of what is a greater number, what is a number that's fewer. But again, I would have a graphic chart with these words for them so they can refer to them as well throughout the lesson if they needed that support. And to continue with listening and reading, just to focus on listening, Gibbons gives an explanation of shadow reading, where the teacher is reading the paragraph, or in this case, the problem for math, and the students are listening for pronunciation, stress, intonation, and for pace. And once I would read it, then I would have the children follow along with me, and I would be shadow reading, and they would also listen for those pronunciation, for the stress and the intonation, and we would continue a good pace so that they can follow along with me easily. And once they were done following along with me, shadow reading, then they would go ahead and read with their partner, and then solve together the problem. One of the strategies that I would use for writing, for my lesson in writing, Gibbons suggests that we do joint construction, and this is something that I found that it's very useful for a lot of my students. I like to do it in whole group, where we together work on the writing. Most of my students are not able to independently write, and the same goes with my case study. She can use known vocabulary words, but to write them in complete sentences is still a little bit of a challenge. So students think together about the writing, but they don't do the writing alone. We do it as a group, and we kind of guide it through with questions. Like here we have the question that says, "How do you know that 48 is greater than 40?" So I would post that question to my students, and together we would come up with suggestions, and we would contribute ideas. I personally like to have them talk to their partner or talk to their group table, and once they've come with an answer, we can come together, and then I would serve as a scribe, and I would write down their ideas. And like I said, most of my students are able to use known vocabulary words from their graphic organizers or vocabulary words that they've already learned. So I would piece those words together, and I would write them in a complete sentence, so they're seeing the writing how it should be done, and then they themselves would write it on their piece of paper. For this domain is and I chose reading. In particular, this lesson 9.5 has a lot of word problems. There's a lot of reading in here, and I really wanted to have them do it together. Again, I would have the children listen and shadow read. I think that's a very important tool for them, just because they're hearing the pronunciation correctly, they're getting the problem read to them so they can have a better understanding of what's being asked to them. And once they do the shadow reading and the peer reading, then we would continue with the rest of the exercises. And they would use their acquired knowledge and be able to complete their writing exercises. Again, this is, like I said, some of these domains kind of go hand in hand. Even though I'm focusing here on on reading, there's a writing component. It's not a lot of writing because they just need to write in the numbers, and then they have to, again, read and determine which blank space is greater than, which blank space is less than, and then they fill in the blanks for this particular problem. So here we have the example that I was saying about of the reading that we have to do in this lesson. There's a lot of reading, and what I like to do and I like to focus on is what Gibbon suggests as the implications for classroom activities to develop the children's phonemic knowledge and alphabet knowledge on a familiar piece of language. So this is something familiar with them. This is something that we do every single day, which is talk about math. And there's key vocabulary words that we've already focused on in the past, so this is familiar to them. But then there's a lot of keywords that we've used only for this topic that we'll focus on. We'll focus on the sentence structure, the grammar, vocabulary words, like I mentioned, sounds within a word. And in my particular classroom, when we read, because my target language is Spanish, we break down words that are hard by syllables. So we always break those words down a couple of times. For example, if we have the word problem, we would break down those words, count out the syllables, say the syllables again, and then once again say the whole word. And if it's a pattern that we are studying in our Spanish language arts, then I would highlight that. See, look, here it is. Here we have the same pattern that we've been working on. And the kids love to see that connection, and they actually point out those connections when we are doing math or science. They're like, hey, look, that's the pattern that we're working on, or that's the phonemic sound that we're working on. And they really enjoy that. And it makes them more confident because they can recognize the patterns that we're learning, and it makes them more enjoyable for them. For my final domain that I will focus on is speaking. And speaking, I got the strategy from Gibbons. The stages of writing, pages 84 through 89. She has 4 different stages. Stage 1 is where students, they kind of are doing the experiment. And in this case, we are solving the math problem together. Stage 2, again, introduction to key vocabulary words. And I can't emphasize enough how I think in all of the domains, vocabulary is key. It's that foundation that our students need. They're reviewing, they're using graphic organizers, and they're building on previous knowledge, as well as using visuals for these key vocabulary words. Stage 3 is teaching guided reporting. and that's the IRE pattern. And again, I have to admit that I was one teacher that would ask a question, get a one-word answer, ask a question, get a one-word answer, and kind of move on. But with this new pattern, a more explicit technique is when you ask a question to the students, and then the students maybe add on with one word, and then maybe you can ask another classmate or have them talk to their peers in a small group. How can they add on to that word? How can they make that a complete sentence, or how can they make that more of a discourse, not just a one-word answer? And from there, build on to that conversation and have other kids participate, so it's not a conversation led by me, but more guided and just more kind of formed by them. And again, like I said, all these domains kind of link with one another. My last domain for speaking kind of leads into writing as well, and that's the stage 4 for the journal writing. And they don't have a particular journal, but this is their math workbook where kids can write all that gathered information from the previous 3 stages. We have the vocabulary words, we have the sentence frames, we have acquired new knowledge. Now we can go ahead and answer these questions that the math is requiring. We can go ahead because we have talked with our pairs, we have talked in our groups, we have discovered sentence frames, and now the kids are able to go ahead and write down these answers because it's been talked about.